Hi, I'm Ben Shirley, and in this tutorial we'll be modelling a simple vehicle. Before we start, you'll need to have the 24 button shelf set up and the textures linked to in the description below in your source images folder. So when you're modelling something specific and recognisable, in this case we're doing probably the most over modelled vehicle in the Maya world, which is a DeLorean from Back to the Future. When you're doing something recognisable like that, it's always a good idea to use image planes and then model against those. So once you've got everything set up in a project folder, we're going to go ahead and import an image plane. So we're going to go to spacebar out to the side view and then go view, image plane, import image, and go to the side one there and click open. Okay. So image planes like this aren't like normal geometry. You can't just simply select them and move them, and I don't like that. So what we're going to do is just create another plane on top of that that is a normal piece of geometry. The reason I don't do this first is that when Maya imports this JPEG image, it imports it perfectly as it is without any distortion. Like, I know that every circle is going to be perfectly circular. So once we know the exact size of the image, I can then go ahead and draw another rectangle on top of that. This is pretty much exactly the same size, and then I can make sure I go to shaded view and assign a new material. I'm going to assign a surface shader. This means that there's no shadows or anything will be applied to this, just like an image plane. So I'm going to click on surface shader. On out color, I'm going to choose file, and I'm going to go to image name and choose the same DeLorean texture and click open. Go to 6, which is textured view. You can see the texture doesn't look very nice to start with, so I'm going to just go to renderer and go to viewport 2.0 or high quality rendering. And even though we've made something the same size, it isn't set up perfectly yet. So if we just go into our texture editor here, if you're having problems or don't know how to do UV editing yet, I would recommend watching the previous tutorial, Introduction to Texturing. Now, it's not being displayed very well at all in our UV texture editor for some reason, but we'll sort that out later. We're just going to move. The most important thing to do is to make sure that the square that you've got in your 3D viewport simply is stretched up to the top of the grid here, like that. So make sure it is a perfect square and fills up the grid or the whole image there. Okay, we're going to come out of the UV texture editor once you've done that. Now I just want to get rid of the original image plane that we put in. So if I zoom out, I can select this toggle over here, and it will also select the image plane itself. I'm going to go to the layer editor and create a new layer with the geometry assigned to it, and just click on V to turn it off. And I'm going to move this back to the back of our geometry, to the back of our scene there. I'm going to move it up so the wheels of the DeLorean touch the grid. I'm going to duplicate this, and if you've already got this set up, if you press E and hold down J, it should move at set integers. So I've set mine as 90 degrees. Again, to change that, click on discrete rotate, type in whatever you want, and then uncheck again. So this time I want to show the back of the car, or the front of the car, so I'm going to rotate it one more time, hold down J, move it up. Now I want to make sure that the front of the car is lined up. It's very important that we do that. So if I look very closely down here, I just want to make sure that matches up. So I need to move it up a bit. I haven't changed the scale, so I know that it should work if I line it up, and that will do. That will do for now. So I can again move it just so that the edge meets just like that as well. Okay. Now if we go to our orthographic views here and just press 6 as you mouse over them and go to your high quality rendering on those. That's fine. So you can see how your view is here. We just need a top view now, so I'm going to duplicate that again, press E, hold down J, rotate it that way, and go to renderer, viewport 2.0 or high quality. Just going to move this down to just below the grid, and the car obviously changes how wide it is as it goes along, but I just want it to match up with the bonnet for the time being. So if we go to the top view, sorry, you won't be able to see it there. It's going to move it up temporarily. Let's make sure the bonnet meets up at the front, just there, and that's about right. So I'll leave it like that just for now and move it down there. Okay, so now if we go and create a simple cube on the grid and go to our side view, you'll see that you are able to see it there. Our front view, however, because the geometry of the image planes is over here, it's actually obscuring the cube. So I'm actually going to move this back to the back of the car like that, and now you can see your geometry there. You can flip the camera to face the opposite way using a Mel script, but we'll do that later. More about that later. So let's go to our side view and zoom in, and we're going to move this up so it about matches the back of the car there. I'm going to make sure that the texture, this grey texture here, is sort of transparent. I'm going to assign a new material, just a normal Lambert, and I'm going to drag the transparency down. I'm just going to call this X-ray. Press enter. So now I can see through it slightly, which is very useful. I'm going to drag it just a bit more. Okay, so the trick is when you're modeling against an image plane is to keep everything as simple as possible. Don't add too many edge loops or anything until you really have to. So I'm just going to drag it down to about there for now, and the bottom part to just above the black part at the front of the car there. And next I'm just going to show a bit more room here. I'm going to go and add an edge loop so that it hits the bottom of the wheel arch just about there. Another one at the bottom of the wheel arch just there, and the same on this one, and just there. It needs to be lined up as exactly as you can. Then we go to vertex. Now instead of clicking once and moving it, you will need to go to vertex and drag a selection box and move everything all at the same time. So I'm dragging this down now so that it matches the bottom of the lighter colour of the car there. The middle bit slightly lower down. Okay, and that bit goes down to about there. The next thing I'm going to do is extrude this black part out from there. So if we go to our 3D view, we can then select the faces, which is the very front one, the very middle one, and the very back one, and click extrude. Now if we go to our side view again, by default it's going to extrude out at these crazy angles, which is not what we want. So I'm going to click on the power button there. It looks like a power button, and then we can extrude down constrained to the grid at a perfect angle. And then I can go along and select the individual vertices, clusters, and move them up to match the image plane like that. And down there. And then I can start doing the top as well now. So I just selected that row there, and I'm moving them up to sort of match the car. Now we get to a point, and just going to move it up to there. We get to a point now where we need to have some extra detail to our shape. So I'm going to add one more edge loop just where the windshield meets the bonnet there, and just select those UVs, press W, and I'm going to move them up. Once you've done that, I'm not going to extrude. I'm not going to just pull these vertices up. I'm actually going to extrude the faces on top here so that later on we can have the main cabin of the car pinched in at the top, as opposed to just being very square. So if we go to our 3D view and select these 3 faces and go to extrude, and back to our side view, we can pull them up to there, then go to vertex and pull them up like this. So I'm just making sure that each existing edge loop matches the geometry nicely. So this is why it's important to have as little as possible, little detail as possible when you're modeling. And I'm going to push that one back to there. So now we can quickly preview what it could look like when you put everything in like that. Obviously the car's far too narrow at the moment. Don't worry about that just yet. So once you've done that, I'm going to pull up or sort out the wheel arches here, and we're going to do that by, you could just do it by eye and add loads of edge loops along here to get the rough shape, but if I want to do it nice and accurately, I'm going to create a cylinder from this side view, starting from the middle of that. I'm just going to pull it out to not the size of the wheel, but the size of the wheel arch. I have to go back into 3D view to complete the creation of that shape, and I'm just going to move it along to about the right spot. Now, it depends on how detailed you want your car to be. I know this is just going to be a paper craft thing, but you can always go into your cylinder shape here and increase or decrease the number of subdivisions. I'm going to leave it at 20 for now, because that's just about fine. I'm going to go to wireframe on shaded. Okay, so I'm going to move this. Once you've created it, I'm just going to move it back in so that we can see the geometry on top nicely. Go back to your side view, click on your geometry, and we're going to add some edge loops now that intersect exactly where the edges of this cylinder are. So obviously they get quite close together towards the end and further apart towards the middle. And once you've done that, you can, once you've done that, you can go to vertex and we can start moving these up so that they match the cylinder below. Because of the slight angle that the base was at, it's not going to be perfect straight away, so you'll have to go back around like this. Okay, that'll do for now. By extruding the bottom faces down, we've been able to keep to, if I move that out of the way slightly, we've been able to keep a vertical line going down there, which would be near impossible to do with another edge loop like this, so that's why we extruded it like that. I'm going to do the same thing with the rear wheel. I'm moving it back so it matches the wheel arch. I'm going to click on this geometry, go to edge mode here, and click away so that it matches up again. If you think you've missed one or haven't done it perfectly, you will have to select both classes of vertices, press W and move them along, and as you do so, make sure that you don't distort what's going on at the top of your mesh there. So I'm going to zoom in and move these up again. So I'm just selecting a few less each time just so we can do it quickly and move that like that. Okay, and I'm going to zoom out, and now I'm going to go to the top view and make sure that the car's wide enough, and obviously it's far too narrow at the moment, so let's move it into the right sort of place. So I'm now matching, I'm just going to pay attention to the bonnet, the very front of the car, just so we match it being as wide as that, just for now. So that will do. Now for some reason the back of the car on the base geometry isn't lined up perfectly, so I'm just going to double check this. I'm going to move that up there. I can see that it's somehow shifted for some reason. That's much better. So now if I move it back down below the geometry and go into my top view, I can just correct that again. Oh, that's about fine. Okay, once you've done that, we're going to go and project some textures onto here. Let's just double check this. So if I go to the top view now, I'm going to resize in the top of the car to match the image below. Don't worry if it doesn't line up perfectly. You must remember that this windscreen is designed to be a papercraft mesh, so it's going to be wider than it really is in real life. You'll need to select these vertices along here. So I'm going to click on that edge and go all the way down to the very back one. Double click on it, and that will select that row there, and then I'm free to rotate it in like that. What we should have done was do this before we added the wheels, the wheel arches, but you can worry about that yourself if you do it like this. But I can simply select that bunch of edges there by double clicking from one end to the other and press E and rotate it in like that. And go to the top view, just make sure it's we're doing a good job and that it is symmetrical. Okay, that'll do. So we definitely should have done that beforehand. It would have been a lot easier, because as you can see, it gets a lot more difficult once you add all this detail. So let's go to our side view now. We can do this to the whole car to start with. So I'm just going to select the entire vehicle, go to Assign New Material, go to Lambert, and we're going to rename it DeLorean. And actually, we're going to DeLorean Texture, just to make sure it's a different one to the top. So we click on the checkerboard next to color, go to File, click on the yellow folder, and go to DeLorean Cropped, press Open. You can see that the car is looking pretty awful at the moment with the texture. It's because we haven't mapped it yet. If you are new to UV mapping and stuff like that, you might have to check out the previous tutorial, but everyone else should know that you can just go to we're going to projection map this. So we're going to go to Create UVs, planar mapping, make sure it's coming from the camera, and click project. And then we have to go to our, I was going to go to 3D view to preview it, and then go to your UV texture editor, and you can see your geometry here is stretched up to make a perfect square, and all we need to do now is squish it down so that it matches exactly this shape here. So if I move that over there, you're going to have to just resize and move for a few minutes here to get it all set up perfectly. It doesn't matter that the UV texture editor has stretched the image out. It will always do this if your image is not exactly square. It doesn't get rid of any detail or anything. But your geometry will also have to be distorted to match it. I'm just going to leave it as that for now. So if I minimize that and go into our 3D view, you can see that the texture has been applied to the side of the car, and it's gone all the way through it because we've planar mapped it all the way through. So now let's go to the top view. So I'm going to select the faces at the top of the car. I'm going to click on the one at the very front and go to the one at the very back. And I'm just going to double check this really quick. I know that the car actually does have a bit of a curved windscreen. So I'm just going to add one edge loop here, one edge loop there, and that will allow us then to pull this edge down so that we have a curved windscreen. Now that we've added this detail, it's become slightly more difficult or time consuming to select everything, but there's a little trick. I'm going to click on not that face there, but the one just above it, and go all the way to the back, and not the very back face, but the one just above it, and then double click, and it will select from one end to the other. And then going to hold down Shift, And then above the spacebar to the right, you've just got these forward and back arrows. So it's essentially shift full stop or shift forward arrow, and you will grow your selection. So now in 3D view, you can see you've just selected the top of the car. Let's go to top view and go to, we've already assigned the texture to the vehicle. We just need to change how it's projected. So we go to create UVs, planar mapping, and let's go back to our UV texture editor. And again, it's just at the moment selecting or showing the top of the car. But if you move this out of the way, you can see that the other geometry with this texture is being shown here as well. So I would recommend moving or playing with manipulating this geometry in a slightly different area so that we don't accidentally select something underneath. So this image is repeated in this grey area here. So if I move it back and rescale it up, obviously I need to rotate it around so it's the right way. You can get it about right. I'm just going to, for now, put it over this area here, just to make sure it's lined up properly. Okay. So, because of the way that this texture is, we need to just select whoops. So in fact, what I'm going to do is move this car and go to select a couple of vertices, UVs, hold down, control, right click and go to shell, and then I'm going to move it very carefully along, and I'm going to have to now look in my 3D view to make absolutely sure that I'm moving it into the right spot, and that's about right there. Okay, so now this leaves me to be free with this one here. So if I go to the top view, I can see what's going on. I need to squish this down and pull that up there so we're not getting the tail lights on the sort of where the rear parcel shelf would be. So I'm going to move that up to about there. Don't worry that it's not being stretched out exactly at this stage. You can always play around later and select these UVs and move them, but just for the interest of time, I'll leave it just like that for now. So if we look at this in our 3D view, we can see that there are some mistakes. We've got the front of the car there and the things aren't quite lined up perfectly. So let's just go and sort that out. So if we go and select the UVs like that, we have to move them up, and I'm going to shrink them down. So W to move them, R to resize, and I'm going to line it up just like that. I need to make sure that we're not getting any windscreen on the bonnet as well. So I'm just lining it up like that. Again, this is quite rough, but this is just a toy car essentially, so I'm not too fussed for the sake of the tutorial. So I'm moving that down to there to make sure the top of the windscreen's lined up where that edge loop is, and along the back just make sure that we're not getting any of the tail lights up there, which is fine. That'll do. You can spend a lot more time getting this set up perfectly, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just doing it as fast as I can. So now we need to select the edges of the bonnet. So I'm selecting just that side there. I'm going to press E and angle them so that they're lined up with the car. And I'm going to move this one up there. And I'm going to do the same to the bottom one. Press E and rotate them ever so slightly so that they're lined up. And again, I have to just move that one up there like that. Okay, now we get onto the front of the car. So if we go to press spacebar and go to the front or front view, select the faces that make up the front of the car. I think these are there underneath. Yeah, I'm going to select these ones as well. And then I'm going to go to the front view and then create UVs planar mapping, and then go to our texture editor, and it's just showing us the front of the car to start with, but once you select the UVs you can see all of your other geometry below. And just as I said in the previous tutorial, if you deselect everything and you want to get something back like the whole shell of UVs, click on a face, go to UV, just select, so clicking on a face isolates that face in the UV texture editor. Do right click and then drag over one UV, hold down Control and right click and go to shell. And then you can move this out of the way. So I'm going to rotate, shrink it down to there, rotate it by 90 degrees and move it over here. So I am going to do this in this quite cluttered up area now over here. So I've got that all lined up like so, and making sure it's definitely not too wide. Excellent. So now if we go to our 3D view, you can see you've done that. We have to do the same to the back as well. Now there isn't a rear view, but that's fine. We can still projection map. So what I'm going to do now is get rid of these construction planes that we set up. I'm going to select them all and click on create a new layer with the selected geometry and then turn it off. And then I can spacebar to the front view after selecting the back faces. Select those as well. Okay, good. And then spacebar to the front view, and then do create UV's planar mapping, just because we know that that is where the right camera angle, and then we have to go into our UV texture editor here, and again just select your UVs first and then you can shrink them down. We need to rotate it and move it over here. Just gonna try and line it up with that texture there and just shrink it until it's just about right. Again, you'll probably have to play around with the texture or the geometry later to make it line up perfectly, but as long as you get the idea, that goes up to there. You can see it's quite stretched here, so I've obviously done something slightly wrong, so I'm going to move it down to about there. And I can see it's flipped for some reason, so I'm just going to flip that around again. So once you've done that, we're just going to go and create the wheels. So if we go to our side view one more time, we can go and assign existing material on this construction cylinder that we made, and we can go to DeLorean texture and go to our UV texture editor. Let's go to UV, and you can see how it's doing the wheels here, which is fine, but an easier way of doing it would just be to select the object and go to create UVs, planar mapping, and resize this down. And the reason I did that was because I know that it's doing it to both sides of the cylinder. So I can move that up like this, make sure it's exactly in the middle of the wheel there. That'll do. So now I'm going to create one more new texture to create the tread on the tires there. So I can move that in a bit like that. Let's resize it. Okay, so now if I click on one face, double click on one next to it, it does select the whole ring. I'm going to assign a new material, go to Lambert, and I'm going to delete history just so I can see the texture up there without having to look too long for it. And I'm going to rename it tire. Click on color, the checkerboard next to color, click on file, click on the yellow folder, and I'm going to go down to the papercraft texture that includes the tires. So in this one it's the details. Open that one up, and I'm going to select it one more time and go to create UV's cylindrical mapping. It hasn't created the cylindrical map at the angle that we want, which is annoying. So we have to, first of all, click on this T shape in the corner, and and then you can select this blue outer ring here, and then or any one of the rotation rings in the middle, and we have to rotate it. I'm going to use the blue one on mine. Hold down J, which should be set up to rotate at 90-degree integers, and oh, it doesn't work. There you go. And that should be just about right there. So now when you go into your UV texture editor, you'll be able to see it's unwrapped the cylinder like this for us. So all we have to do is resize it, move it down so that it's over the tire texture there, and do whatever we like to stretch it out there. And later on you can obviously go along in your own time and add all the other details like the flying engines and the the rubbish to energy unit and stuff like that. So we go to the 3D view. Once you've textured the tyre and you're happy with it, I would recommend adding a slight bevel to the edges so that in the renders you do get some light caught on it. So created 2 edge loops there. If I went to bevel, it would create a new face that would be untextured and quite annoying to work with. So I've just added edge loops, and then I can resize them ever so slightly and make sure I've hardened those edges there so we don't get any strange shading going on. Okay, once you're happy with your wheel, you can just simply duplicate it to the front and duplicate it again to the other side. And there you have the basic setup for the DeLorean. It's quite messy at the moment, but you can obviously go along and clean it up in your own time and add all the other details.